do we commit the fundamental attribution error? Why are attributions biased towards internal dispositional attributions and away from situational or external attributions? One explanation is perceptual salience, that as we observe a behavioral episode, the actor is what is perceptually salient. They are the focus of our attention. They're the focal point of the scene. So what we are paying attention to, and everything else fades into the background. So all of these situational explanations for an actor's behavior are just peripheral cues. They are not what we're paying attention to, that instead the actor is what is perceptually salient, and that often situational influences are invisible. So as that student walks into class late, they are what I'm focused on, and in fact, the situational explanations for their behavior may be invisible to me, the observer. So if terrible traffic was the explanation for their lateness, I didn't see that traffic. I wasn't in the car with them. And so if I can't observe it, how can I use it to guide my impression of this individual, my attribution for their behavior? So according to this argument, if we vary the perceptual salience of an observer, then we should see a resulting variation in the attribution process. Taylor and Fisk in 1975 did just that. They manipulated the visual focal points of participants through seating arrangement. In this particular study, we have actor A and actor B who are engaged in a conversation, and we have our participants who are assigned the role of observer, and they are randomly assigned to seats in the audience, which varies their perspective and the focal point of their visual field. And so if you see, we have participants who are randomly assigned observer B position, which means that they are behind actor A, and directly in their line of sight is actor B, versus participants over here who are assigned to the observer A position. They are behind actor B, and directly in their line of sight is actor A. And then we have these neutral positions to the side in which they see actor A and actor B equally in their visual field. All of these participants, as observers, observe the conversation between the two actors, and then afterwards they are asked to evaluate the conversation and the contributions of both actor A and actor B. Of particular interest is the observers or the participants' perceptions of the contributions of actor A versus actor B. When asked who spoke the most, who played the dominant role of the conversation, who directed and led the conversation, those seated here in the observer B position indicated that they thought that actor B played the dominant role, talked more, and directed and led the conversation. Whereas those who observed the exact same conversation, when asked, they indicated that they believed that actor A played the dominant role, led and directed the conversation, and talked more. In fact, this conversation was scripted such that actor A and actor B played an equal role in the conversation and talked an equivalent amount of time. But as we see with our observers, they felt that whoever their attention was directed towards played the dominant role. So they are the focal point of their attention, and they are driving their perception of the social interaction. Now imagine our neutral position here. What would we expect when asked who played a dominant role, who talked more in the conversation? We find that actor A and actor B both take up the same amount of space in their visual field. Their attention is divided equally between actor A and actor B. And just as we would expect, our participants who are facing both actor A and actor B rated their role as equivalent, that both actor A and actor B played a similar role in the conversation. Neither played a dominant role or directed the conversation, and that they both spoke an equivalent amount of time, just as we would expect. So Fisk and Taylor found that if you vary the focal point of people's attention, if you vary the perceptual salience, you can, by that means, vary someone's attribution of this particular behavioral episode. So you may be thinking, why is this important to know? Why is it important for us to understand the fundamental attribution error, and particularly perceptual salience, as an explanation? This research has been extended to understand videotape confessions during police investigations and subsequent trials. And so with the advancement in technology, the availability of video recorders to record police interrogations of suspects and to record confessions of suspects, it was believed that this video evidence would get us closer to the truth, that this would be much more valuable to present to potential jurors than a written transcript of the interrogation and the written signed confession of the suspect. That having the videotaped evidence with the audio and the visual component, that this would provide a much more rich source of information to jurors, that not only would we have the written transcript, but we would also have the facial expressions, the tone of voice, etc., that the videotapes would provide, and of course began to present videotape confessions as opposed to just written transcripts, with this assumption that this would lead to more fair and unbiased evaluation of the evidence at hand. But what fundamental attribution error predicts, and particularly given our knowledge of perceptual salience, what we should expect is that the angle of the camera in these videotaped confessions should play a vital role in jurors' evaluation of this social interaction, and what research has subsequently suggested should play a critical role in jurors' perception of the validity of that confession. And so researchers have taken known false confessions, replicated what has later been identified and acknowledged as false confessions by judges and legal experts, and recreated these interrogations and videotape them to present to participants, varying the camera angle of these recreated, reenacted false confessions, and presented these to participants and asked participants to rate the validity of the confession. Do you think that this is a true confession to a crime, or do you think that this is a potential coerced false confession? What researchers find is that the camera angle is incredibly important to understanding the ratings of participants when viewing these videotaped confessions. And so in this first scenario here, which is typically the camera angle that is presented to jurors, in which the camera is focused on the suspect here, the participants are much more likely to think that this is a true, valid confession and not coerced, Because what is the focal point of attention? It is the suspect. And so if the suspect confesses to a crime, more likely that our attributions are guided by the internal characteristics of the suspect. So why did this person confess to the crime? Well, it must be because of their internal guilt. Right? They confessed because they committed the crime. Whereas if we vary the angle of the camera, this time directed towards the police interrogator, the participants are much more likely to acknowledge that the interrogator may have used coercive or unfair tactics to elicit a false confession from the suspect. And that if we take this neutral and balanced perspective, that participants are much more likely to acknowledge the dual role of the suspect and the interrogator in eliciting the confession.